The streets of Lagos pulsed with the usual chaos of late-evening traffic, honking horns, shouting vendors, and the blaring of overworked engines merging into a city-wide rhythm. Inside a black, bulletproof SUV, billionaire Raymond Cole tapped impatiently at his phone. His security detail was light tonight, just one guard up front, thanks to a last-minute business meeting that had thrown off the usual protocol. The car crept forward, boxed in by danfos, street hawkers, and commuters, when suddenly everything snapped into silence. A loud bang, the driver's side window shattered, and masked men descended with military precision. One yanked open the door, dragging out the driver and slamming him against the tarmac. Another man pointed a pistol through the half-shattered glass at Raymond's face. Panic seized the car. Raymond froze, his hand mid-air, too shocked to reach for the panic button on his phone. Then, in a heartbeat, everything changed. A rock flew from the crowd, smacking one of the masked attackers on the side of the head. Another followed. Shouts rang out. A barefoot boy, maybe 13, scrawny and wild-eyed, burst through the onlookers, throwing everything he had: stones, curses, even a half-empty soda bottle. The attackers hesitated, momentarily confused by the sheer madness of the boy's assault. That moment was enough. Sirens wailed from down the road as Raymond's backup security vehicles screeched through the gridlock. The attackers scattered, vanishing into alleys as quickly as they had appeared. Raymond was pulled from the car, shaken but unharmed. His guards swept the area, securing the perimeter. But the boy gone, like a shadow swallowed by the city. As the crowd buzzed and phones lit up to record the aftermath, Raymond looked round, chest still heaving, and asked quietly, almost to himself, who was that boy? His guard shook his head, scanning the crowd. No idea, sir. No one's seen him before. Raymond stared into the distance, still catching his breath, not just from the fear of death, but from the raw, fearless courage of a street kid who had nothing to gain and everything to lose. Raymond Cole lived in a fortress of glass and silence. His Ikoyi mansion, a minimalist marvel of steel and stone, sat perched above the city like a god's retreat. Automated lights, biometric locks, floors so clean they reflected your thoughts. Yet inside it was cold, lifeless. The laughter that once echoed through its halls, the laughter of his wife, now divorced, and his only daughter, who hadn't spoken to him in years, had long since faded. All that remained was the constant hum of tech, screens glowing with stock tickers and acquisition reports. Raymond had clawed his way to the top from nothing, built a tech empire on algorithms and relentlessness. But success had calcified him. He no longer knew how to touch the world without scanning it for flaws or profit. The near-death experience in traffic, the boy who risked his life to save his had shaken something loose, something buried. He couldn't stop thinking about the kid's face, that blur of courage in a sea of fear. Within 24 hours, Raymond posted a 5 million reward across news outlets and social media. "Find the boy who saved my life," the headline read. But Lagos is a city of masks, and Elijah was one of its quietest ghosts. In the slums of Ajegunle, Elijah crouched beside his mother's cot under a leaking tin roof. The rain tapped out a mournful rhythm overhead. The stench of stagnant gutters and burning plastic seeped through their thin walls, but Elijah didn't flinch. At 13, he had already seen too much to fear a bad smell or a stormy night. His mother, Mama Blessing, coughed weakly, the rattle in her chest louder each day. His little sister Ada, just 6, slept curled beside her, unaware of how close the world was to collapse. Elijah's days were a blur of motion-washing car windshields at traffic stops, selling pure water from a yellow bowl on his head, carrying loads in the market for spare change. He was smart, sharper than most. Boys twice his age and brave in ways no child should have to be. but he was also terrified. He'd seen his face flash across a stranger's phone screen in the market. 5 million reward. His heart dropped. Not from excitement, but fear. What if they took him, blamed him? What if they separated him from Mama and Ada? He didn't trust men like Raymond Cole. Rich men came to the slums only when they wanted something: votes, workers, or bodies. Elijah had seen it. He knew the kind of hunger that lived in the eyes of desperate people who would sell out even a child for a handful of naira. So he went deeper into hiding, changed his routine, avoided the junctions where he worked. Every coin he earned went toward medicine for his mother, food for Ada. But it wasn't enough. Mama Blessing's condition was worsening. She needed real treatment, a hospital, tests, maybe surgery, and all Elijah had were coins in a biscuit tin and a prayer stuck in his throat. Across the city, Raymond Cole stared out from his office, sleepless, haunted by the one boy who had acted with more honor in 5 seconds than most of his boardroom had in 5 years. The man who once solved problems with data now wrestled with something messy: a gratitude, guilt, purpose, and still no sign of the boy. 2 worlds, divided by wealth but now tethered by fate, were on a slow, inevitable collision course. After days of digital sleuthing, Raymond's team finally found him grainy CCTV footage, matched faces from roadside vendors, a crowdsourced clip posted by a street hawker on TikTok. The barefoot boy who vanished into the Lagos crowd had a name: Elijah. He was tracked to the slums of Ajegunle. And though the area was rough, Raymond didn't hesitate. He sent a car. Elijah was hesitant, suspicious, even when a sleek black SUV pulled up beside the broken gutter where he usually sold sachets of water. He nearly ran. But something in the driver's gentle tone, or perhaps the exhaustion from days of hiding, made him pause. He agreed to go more for curiosity than trust. Raymond's mansion overwhelmed him. The marble floors, the silence, the scent of lemon-polished wood and air-conditioned irrit was another planet. Elijah stood awkwardly in the massive sitting room, clutching the fraying strap of his nylon bag. Raymond entered, calm and warm, but visibly studying the boy. He offered food. Elijah accepted only bread and juice, eating carefully, like someone used to being watched. Raymond then reached across the table and slid an envelope forward. "There's money in here. It's yours. You earned it," he said. Elijah blinked, then gently pushed it back. "I didn't do it for money," he said, eyes steady. "I thought someone was going to die." The room fell silent. For a man used to deals, buyouts, and motives cloaked in self-interest, Raymond was stunned. There was no performance in Elijah's voice, just truth. Something cracked inside him. He asked to visit Elijah's home. The boy was reluctant, but nodded. They drove through winding streets until the road turned to mud and the mansion of glass became a memory. Raymond stepped out into the slum and was hit by the smell of refuse and the weight of hopelessness. Tin roofs sagged under the rain, kids played barefoot in puddles, and women cooked over open flames. Inside Elijah's shack, his mother lay on a cot, barely conscious. Ada hid behind a curtain, staring wide-eyed at the strange man in polished shoes. Raymond didn't speak much. He didn't know how to. He just looked, and what he saw, what he felt, was something he hadn't felt in years. Shame. That night, as thunder rolled over Ajegunle, Elijah crouched beside his mother, who had collapsed again, her fever spiking. Panic set in. There was no money. The local clinic wanted a deposit they couldn't afford. Desperate, Elijah opened his biscuit tin and found only coins. With tears threatening, he grabbed the only thing of value he owned, his late father's broken button. Fernand rushed to the roadside to sell it for scrap. Before he could reach the dealer, a black SUV pulled up again. Raymond stepped out, without ceremony. He didn't ask questions. He didn't offer money this time. He simply said, "Come with me." At the private hospital, Doctors rushed Mama Blessing into care. Raymond handled the paperwork. Elijah watched from the hallway, Ada asleep in his lap, unsure if he was dreaming. Within 48 hours, Mama Blessing was stable. The family was moved to Raymond's guest house, a smaller building on his compound, but still larger than anything Elijah had ever seen. To the world, it looked like an act of charity, but for Raymond, it was something else, something deeper. Watching Elijah hold his mother's hand, seeing how he shared food with his sister before touching a bite himself, it stirred something long buried, not pity, not debt, but a memory of who he once was, of love that wasn't transactional, of purpose that wasn't linked to profit. For the first time in years, Raymond Cole felt human again in the weeks that followed. A fragile but beautiful rhythm began to form between Raymond and Elijah. What started as gratitude evolved into mentorship. Raymond, for the first time in years, found himself wanting to share his knowledge, his time, even his laughter. He cleared a corner of his home office and set up a computer just for Elijah, teaching him how to code, how to build simple apps, how to think in patterns and logic. Elijah, bright and eager, soaked up everything like dry earth meeting rain. Their sessions stretched into evenings, sometimes interrupted by Raymond's soft, unfamiliar chuckles as Elijah asked innocent, pointed questions that no one else dared to. For the first time in years, Raymond laughed not the polite, sterile laugh of business meetings, but something genuine and unguarded. There was life again in the mansionada, running around the halls, Elijah's quiet presence in the study, Mama Blessing sitting in the garden when she could, whispering thanks under her breath. But life, as always, didn't move in straight lines. The first crack came quietly, over tea. Mama Blessing, stronger but not well, looked Raymond in the eye and said, "When I get better, we're going back." Raymond, caught off guard, tried to smile. "You're welcome to stay as long as you need." But she shook her head firmly. "We're not meant for this place. My children are starting to forget where they come from." There was no malice in her tone, only quiet conviction. She didn't trust the rich, not fully. She saw how Ada, now wearing new dresses and holding a tablet, had started mimicking the polished accents of Raymond's house staff. She heard her daughter refuse her favorite street snack, saying it was dirty. Something in that broke Mama Blessing's heart. Meanwhile, at work, Raymond's absence began to ripple. Shareholders grumbled. The board grew restless. "Your philanthropy is commendable," one executive sneered during a meeting, "but the company can't run on sentiment." Raymond didn't argue. He hadn't the energy to, but he knew the look in their eyes. The same one he used to wear when people wasted time on emotion. Now he was the one they whispered about. Asterisk, he's slipping. He's distracted. Asterisk, the pressure mounted further at a private charity gala. Raymond had insisted on bringing Elijah and Ada. He wanted them to see that the world was wide and full of possibility. But not everyone shared his warmth. Elijah stood awkwardly in a borrowed suit, his shoes a size too big, while Ada clung to her brother's side. The other children, wealthy, polished, cruel in that careless way rich kids often are-snickered behind fake smiles. One boy whispered loudly, "Is that the street kid Mr. Cole adopted?" Another mimed cleaning a windshield. Elijah heard it all. He said nothing, but later that night he washed his hands 3 times, scrubbing them until they were raw. Worse still, Nicole came home. Raymond's estranged daughter arrived unannounced, her eyes icy, her voice brittle with resentment. She confronted him in the hallway, her words sharp and fast. "So now you're a savior. You're giving a poor kid everything I begged you for." Raymond, stunned, tried to explain, but she wouldn't let him. "You couldn't come to my graduation. You missed my wedding. You didn't even call when I had my miscarriage. But now you're playing Father of the Year to a stranger's son." Her voice cracked. "You always had love in you, Dad. You just chose to give it to everyone but me. Unseen around the corner, Elijah stood frozen. Every word struck like a hammer to his chest. He backed away slowly, guilt rising like bile in his throat. That night, he barely spoke. The coding lessons stopped. He avoided Raymond's gaze. He even tried to convince Mama Blessing that they should leave early, even though she had started coughing again, deep, racking coughs that left blood on the cloth she thought she'd hidden. Raymond noticed. He confronted her gently, but firmly. She finally admitted the truth. Her condition was worse than they thought. The hospital had run advanced scans. The diagnosis had come, quietly and cruelest stage for lung disease, possibly untreatable without a transplant. Her time was short. She hadn't told Elijah. She didn't want to take his light away. Raymond sat in his study long after everyone had gone to bed. The silence pressed in, heavier than ever. The boy he had grown to care for was pulling away. His own daughter had reopened old wounds. The company was beginning to slip from his hands. And now, the woman who had given him a second chance at feeling Mama Blessing was fading. Somewhere inside, the version of himself that had lived in cold marble halls and corporate jets screamed to pull away, to close the gates, to stop feeling. But he couldn't. He had changed. The problem was, he no longer knew if that change was enough to save anyone, least of all himself. The decision had been building inside Raymond for weeks. Like a rising tide, he could no longer hold back. He had come to love Elijah and Ada in a way he hadn't thought himself capable of anymore. Their laughter, their questions, their presence had cracked open something tender in him. And with Mama Blessing's worsening condition, he felt the urgency grow. He wanted to secure their future, to protect them in a world that had offered them nothing. So he made a decision. He summoned his lawyers, prepared the adoption documents, arranged for private schooling, set up a trust fund that would make both children financially secure for life. When he sat across from Mama Blessing one evening, the sun soft on the glass walls, he spoke gently but firmly. I want to adopt Elijah and Ada. I want them to have everything they deserve. Mama Blessing's expression didn't change for several seconds. Then her eyes hardened, and she sat up straighter despite the pain in her chest. No, she said simply. Raymond blinked, stunned. No, he echoed, as if he hadn't understood. I'm not giving my children away, she said, her voice quiet but firm. Not for marble floors, not for school uniforms, not even for a future you think you can buy. Raymond's calm began to crack. I'm not buying them, he said, his voice rising. I'm giving them a life, a real chance, safety, stability. Isn't that what every parent wants? But Mama Blessing didn't flinch. I want them to grow, yes, but not as your charity trophies. They are not ornaments in your redemption story. The words hit harder than he expected. Something inside him twisted. I gave you everything, he snapped, standing now. Why isn't that enough? The silence between them was thick and bitter. That night, Raymond paced his mansion, guilt battling fury, regret battling pride. In the morning, they were gone. No warning, no goodbye. Only a note left on the neatly folded bedsheets in the guest house. Asterisk, thank you for your kindness, but my children need more than money. They need roots. They need to remember who they are. You gave us much, but I must give them back their identity. Blessing. Raymond read the note a dozen times, each word slicing deeper. His home, once again, fell silent, emptier than before. He searched, but there was no trace. His contacts, in Ajiganal, found nothing. No forwarding address, no school records, nothing. A week passed, then another dot, and then, one afternoon, as he sat in his study, avoiding the board, avoiding the calls, a junior employee burst in holding a phone. Sir, you need to see this. It was a video, grainy but clear. Elijah, now in a clean second hand school uniform, stood at a cracked podium in a tiny hall, the rebuilt slum school Raymond had funded months ago, hoping to uplift the area discreetly. He had never visited the site since, but there it was, fresh paint, new windows, donated computers, and there was Elijah, speaking to a room full of children like him. He gave me tools, Elijah said into the mic, his voice steady. He gave me knowledge, but my mother, she gave me direction. She showed me where I come from, and who I'm meant to be. I need both to survive. I need both to grow. The crowd clapped. Behind him, Ada waved proudly. Even in his humble clothes, Elijah stood tall. Raymond felt the breath leave his chest. In that moment, the pride, the pain, the longing all merged into something unnameable. He hadn't lost them. Not really. They weren't his to lose. They were finding their own path stronger because of his help, but not owned by it and for. The first time Raymond understood what it meant to love without possession. In the months that followed, Raymond Cole returned to a Juggernaut with cameras or press releases, but quietly, almost humbly, he walked its muddy streets without bodyguards, greeted shopkeepers by name, and sat on plastic stools to drink kunu from roadside vendors. The slum that once represented everything he had escaped now became the place where he chose to give back. He funded the rebuilding of crumbling homes, upgraded the local school with better equipment, and set up a scholarship program with internships at his tech firm for bright kids with big dreams but no means. Slowly, the community began to welcome him not as a savior, but as someone who was trying to listen and learn. One afternoon, he found himself standing once again in front of the small home where Mama Blessing now lived, a modest place, but clean and dignified, surrounded by neighbors who loved her. She opened the door, her frame frailer now, but her eyes sharp as ever. Raymond didn't bring gifts. He didn't come with promises. He simply bowed his head slightly and said, "I'm sorry. I was trying to fix what I didn't understand." She looked at him for a long moment, then stepped aside and let him in. They sat on two old chairs as children played outside. "You meant well," she said softly, "but meaning well isn't the same as knowing what's needed." Raymond nodded, his voice quiet. "I want to help, not by taking them, but by standing beside them. I want to be there for Elijah as a mentor, a sponsor, not a father, but maybe a second voice." A smile crept onto her face, tired but warm. "Then we do it together," she said. "You'll teach him the world. I'll remind him where he came from. It wasn't a contract. It wasn't an arrangement. It was something pure, a bond forged, not by power or desperation, but by respect." Weeks later, Nicole came to not in a chauffeur-driven car, but by bike. She didn't tell anyone she was coming. She stood at the edge of the schoolyard, watching Elijah teach Ada how to fix a broken computer in the tiny lab Raymond had helped install. Nicole stood for a while, unnoticed, until Elijah turned and spotted her. She gave him a shy, crooked smile, the kind that said asterisk, "I'm not sure how to start, but I'd like to try." Then she reached into her tote and handed him a flyer. "Tech, for tomorrow, free coding classes for underserved youth. Asterisk, I'm teaching," she said, almost embarrassed. "If you want to come by, or help." Elijah took it, smiling back, unsure what to say but hopeful. In a world that often took more than it gave, they were learning how to give back in the right way together. And slowly, something beautiful began to grow, not out of wealth, but out of wisdom, humility, and second chances. Years later, the sun shone brightly over the graduation grounds of one of the country's top universities. Rows of families filled the seats, cheering as names were called. But when Elijah stepped up to the podium in his cap and gown, a hush fell over the crowd. He stood tall, confident, the first student from the slums of Ajganal to ever make it this far. His eyes swept across the audience until they found them his people. Mama Blessing, older now but dignified, sat proudly beside Ada, who had grown into a bright, poised teenager. And next to them, Raymond Colgreer, gentler, no longer the untouchable tech titan, but a man shaped by love, loss, and learning, clutched a handkerchief, eyes glistening. Elijah's voice rang out with quiet strength. People often ask me who saved me, he began. And the truth is, no one person did. He paused, letting the silence stretch. The man who saved me gave me money. The woman who raised me gave me morals. But the child I once was gave me courage. The crowd erupted into applause. Many moved to tears. Elijah smiled, but it wasn't pride in his expression, it was peace. The kind that comes from knowing exactly who you are and how far you've come. As the camera panned across the clapping audience, it paused on Raymond, wiping his eyes, Mama blessing, squeezing his hand gently, and Ada resting her head on her mother's shoulder. And then, as Elijah turned to walk off the stage, he looked into the crowd one last time and smiled.